Alright, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores, and man, it's time to talk about it, bro. We got to take a look at a lot of the advanced stats, pro football focus grades, all kinds of stuff. Y'all don't understand how detailed this video is about to get. You thought the other videos were detailed? These are some very detailed, very specific, advanced metrics that we're going to take a look at. And we're going to try to figure out who's the most to blame for that Commanders versus Bills loss. Is it Sam Howell? Is it this offensive line? Is it Eric Bieniemy? We're going to dive into stats for all of them and truly try to find out like whose fault it was. Also, Sam Howell looks like he's on pace for an NFL record. Good or bad? We got to talk about it. Also, is Kendall Fuller one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL? We got to take a look at some stats that back that up as well, man. We have a lot to talk about. Also, I have a short little injury report at the end. The fact that Logan Thomas is back practicing right now. He's limited. He's only doing individual stuff. But the fact that he's back at practice shows that he may be able to play in this upcoming game against the Eagles. So we're going to take a look at, again, a lot of advanced statistics, a lot of pro football focus grades, who are highest graded defensive players, lowest ones, highest graded defensive players, lowest ones, all of that type of stuff. So, well, man, buckle up, because this one's serious, bro. This one, a lot more tabs and notes than I normally have in these types of videos. So I'm really excited. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure y'all stay tuned. Of course, I will be live streaming this upcoming game against the Eagles, so make sure y'all pull up for that. I'm working on a game preview breakdown for the upcoming matchup against the Eagles as well, so be on the lookout for that tomorrow, because that's going to be a full breakdown of what are our toughest matchups, where are some places that we could take advantage of the Eagles' weaknesses, all of that type of stuff. So that's going to be a full breakdown of basically how the Commanders can upset the Eagles type of thing. So be on the lookout for that. Of course, the live stream all 4 quarters for the upcoming Eagles game, live stream afterwards, all of that type of stuff. So stay tuned. Without further ado, man, let's get it.
You tell your family you're gonna be a commander.
All right, so let's start with some pro football focus grades before we get to the nitty gritty. So first of all, offense wise, Brian Robinson was our highest graded defensive player with an 82.8. Samuel Cosmi second with an 80.2. Terry McLaurin third. Curtis Samuel fourth. Somehow Andrew Wiley fifth. Somehow, with a 77 run block grade, basically carrying him, because his pass block grade was a 55, which makes a lot of sense. That's only better than Nick Gates and Sadiq Charles as far as the offensive line goes, but it's not as good as Samuel Cosmi and Charles Leno. But we're going to get to that. We're going to get to the offensive line specifically soon. But just as our top 5 grades, there you go. Number 6 is Charles Leno. Chris Rodriguez is 7. Jamison Crowder played 1 offensive snap, ended up 8th. But that's just like that little slight default 60. And then everybody else was basically below average. So then you go, I mean, our worst graded player was Sam Howell. Not very surprised there with a 45.3. Sadiq Charles was 2nd worst. Nick Gates was 3rd worst. Antonio Gibson, of course, fumbling was 4th worst. Even though, hey man, his pass blocking was a 77. He's improving, and he was probably better than what Brian Robinson, because Brian Robinson, I vividly remember him getting bullied and mutilated on some pass blocking stuff. Actually, yeah, it was. His pass blocking grade of a 24.9 was by far the worst out of anybody on the Commanders against the Bills, which makes sense because, again, I vividly remember watching the game live how bad he was at pass blocking. Meanwhile, Antonio Gibson, even though he had a terrible game overall, just mostly because of that fumble that he had, very costly fumble, he's becoming a better pass blocker with a 77.4 grade, and the only people who had higher pass blocking grades than him were Charles Leno and Samuel Cosmi. You're starting left tackle and starting right guard. So that's very encouraging. But then, yeah, those are some of the most notable grades that I looked at. Then going specifically to offensive line, pass blocking wise, you had Charles Leno, then Samuel Cosmi, then Antonio Gibson, then John Bates, and then somehow Andrew Wiley. I don't know how Sadiq Charles, Nick Gates got worse pass blocking grades than him. I understand Brian Robinson, but boy, I remember Andrew Wiley being so bad live. Maybe I'm gonna have to go back and find the time to look at that all 22 to really get a good answer on what's going on there. Then run blocking wise, Andrew Wiley was graded our best run blocker, only ahead of Cole Turner, which is a good thing. Cole Turner becoming a better blocker means he can stay on the field more often, which means that, you know, That'll only help his chances of getting targeted more in the passing game because he seems to catch everything. Then Samuel Cosme's third, Curtis Samuel fourth, and Terry McLaurin fifth. And then after that, it's pretty much like the average of 60s where you basically did nothing. And then after that, it's who's the worst ones. And Sadiq Charles and Charles Leno were apparently our worst run blockers from that game. Then defense, our highest graded defensive player, highest graded player period on the entire Commanders team out of anybody. Defense, offense, whoever. Kendall Fuller with a 92.1 with a 91.9 coverage grade. That's ridiculous. Percy Butler was our second highest graded defender with an 80. Then there's Deron Payne and Montez Sweat tied for third with a 70.7. Jamin Davis with a 68.9 fifth place. Jonathan Allen sixth place with a 66.1. Cameron Curl seventh place with a 61.5. Then after that is pretty much the averages. Our worst graded players was James Smith Williams 41.2. Cody Barton second worst, no surprise there. But his tackling was an 84.5. That's elite grading right now, right there. And then Derek Forrest third worst. I can understand because I remember vividly him missing some coverages in that game. And then let's get the coverage, man, which is going to transition us to Kendall Fuller, which is going to start us with the whole advanced statistics and things like that. So looking at the highest coverage grades out of any corner in the NFL so far, according to Pro Football Focus through the first 3 weeks, you have Taveri Thomas, I think that's how you pronounce that, from the Houston Texans. I'm sorry, I do not know how to pronounce his name, with a 90 coverage grade over these first 3 weeks. Trent McDuffie from the Kansas City Chiefs with an 89.9, the second highest. Then Kendall Fuller, the third highest, with an 89.8 through the first 3 weeks of this NFL regular season. Is Kendall Fuller one of the best coverage cornerbacks in the NFL? Let's keep diving into it. Kendall Fuller's 88.2 overall grade is the second highest amongst all cornerbacks in the NFL right now. So he has the third highest coverage grade, but the second highest overall grade, which takes into account like tackling, everything, run defense, all that type of stuff. He's been targeted 12 times, allowing 5 catches for 26 yards on the entire season so far. Is Kendall Fuller the best corner in the NFL? Is he the best corner at the very least on the Washington Commanders? I mean, right now, single coverage wise, a 91.9 grade. 1 catch allowed for 9 yards, 1 interception, 4 forced incompletions, and a 0 passer rating allowed. You can argue Kendall Fuller is the best single coverage cornerback in the NFL right now. Kendall Fuller versus the Bills specifically, 35 coverage snaps, 5 targets, 1 reception allowed, -1 passing yards allowed, 1 interception, and again a 0 passer rating allowed. Is Kendall Fuller the best corner in the NFL this year? I don't know, man. There's the statistics to back it up. I wouldn't necessarily say that myself, but the statistics are there to say that he is the best corner at the very least on the Commanders. If not, I mean, even beyond that, maybe the best corner in NFL. Now let's start to dive into some of this Sam Howell chaos right now. Let's get to the Sam Howell part of these advanced stats, because woo boy, that man is trying to set a record. All right, so first of all, let's start with the sacks, man. So, most sacks quarterback in the NFL right now so far this season. Derek Carr, and he ended up getting hurt, so he didn't even finish that game. C.J. Stroud with 11. Daniel Jones, Desmond Ridder, and Deshaun Watson tied with 12. Justin Fields and Ryan Tannehill tied at 13. Guess who's first place? Sam Howell. Guess how big of a gap it is? Sam Howell has 19. Second most sacked quarterbacks, Justin Fields and Ryan Tannehill, again, have 13. Sam Howell has 19. A 6 sack gap between him and the next most sacked quarterbacks in the NFL. But okay, maybe you say, okay, Sam Howell has thrown the ball more than anybody else, so he's had the opportunity to get sacked the most. Well, no, let's look at sack rate as well. Let's look at sack percentage. He's the highest there as well with a 15.4%. Ryan Tannehill second with a 13.1, Justin Fields third with an 11.5, Desmond Ridder fourth, 11.3, all of that type of stuff. It just keeps going and going and going. Surprisingly, Jalen Hurts is sixth and Daniel Jones is seventh. Now let's compare this to highest sack rate in the Super Bowl era, like since Super Bowls have been a thing. You have Rob Johnson first place with a 14.8, at least minimum 500 passes. Sam Howell right now has a 15.71. So he is on pace to have the highest sack rate in the NFL Super Bowl era history right now. That's insane. That's crazy. Sam Howell has been sacked 19 times in the first 3 games of this season. 19 sacked allowed through 3 games, the most of any team in almost 20 years. The Commanders are tied with the 2005 Texans for most allowed during a 3-game span, and it is the 5th most sacks allowed through 3 games since 1982 when sacks first became an official statistic. Sam Howell is currently on pace to be sacked for 107 sacks this season. The most time a quarterback has ever been sacked in a season was David Carr with 76 back in 2002. Sam Howell is on pace to get 107. That is crazy, bro. We can't go for that. I'm sorry, we just can't go for that. Also, out of the 9 sacks that Howell ended up with against the Bills, they have them timed. Somebody brought up the times. One of them, it took 3.2 seconds, another 3.96, then 3.22, then 3.3, then 2.26. That's completely on the offensive line. 2.89, you know, debatable. 4.06 Sam Howell, 3.88 Sam Howell, 3.08 debatable. So if you don't get the picture, let's break it down like this as to where, like, if this is more Sam Howell's fault or the offensive line's fault. Well, when you're looking at the average time to throw versus average target depth in 2023 so far, right now Tua Tagovailoa is killing it. But when you look at the chart, Sam Howell has been given more average time to throw this season than most quarterbacks in the NFL, and yet at the same time he's been the most sacked in the NFL. So what does that say? Is that more Sam Howell or the offensive line? I'm leaning towards Sam Howell right now. But we're going to take a look at some offensive line statistics as well. But let's keep it going. Sam Howell has had at least 2.5 seconds to throw on 78 of his 124 dropbacks. Kirk Cousins is the only quarterback that's had more time than that so far. So technically, Sam Howell has had more time to throw than every quarterback in the NFL than Kirk Cousins. But at the same time, Sam Howell is responsible for 23.8% of his pressures, which is the second worst, only behind Russell Wilson. It keeps going. There's a stat that accounts for how well quarterbacks avoid letting pressures become sacks. So basically, pressure to sack percentages. If it's a pressure, does it turn into a sack, or do you find a way to get the ball out of your hands? Do you escape it? Whatever. And so percentage of time pressured that becomes a sack, Sam Howell is last in that stat right now with a 39.6%. Tannehill is second with a 35.1%. Derek Carr, third worst with a 31.4%. Pat Mahomes is number 1 at 2.6% for reference. Pat Mahomes 2.6%, Sam Howell 39.6%, the worst in the NFL. So right now, Sam Howell has the worst percentage pressure to sack rate right now in the NFL. So he's basically, when there's pressure, who allows themselves to get sacked the most? Sam Howell is the worst in the NFL right now. Like literally right now. The worst. Also, there's certain things where it's just like you got to see the field better, man. It's not just avoiding sacks. If you look at this right here, this screenshot, there's a play where Jahan Dotson, that's him in the red circle, wide open for a touchdown. Remember, we didn't score any touchdowns this game, and this may have been the same drive where we ended up going for it on 4th down and didn't get it, or maybe we just ended up getting 3 points out of it. But either way, we should have had a touchdown right here, wide open. Sam Howell ends up throwing it to the double team, almost kind of triple team receiver at the top of the screen, near the top of the screen, back in the end zone. So we just got to be better there, man. Sam Howell, we just got to be better. But also there's plays like this. Here's a clip I'm gonna show you right now where it's really just like, what do you do? The way that the Bills designed their defense, the defensive coordinator was on one. Because what do you do, man? They ended up at first disguising the blitz, and they only end up rushing 4. So there's 7 other guys in coverage, and somehow only rushing 4 still results in 1 free guy coming at Sam Howell without being blocked. 5 offensive linemen, 4 guys rushing, and a guy still goes unblocked to Sam Howell, which led to an interception. Now, the interception is still worst case scenario, but hey, man, it's kind of, you're looking like, what can Sam Howell do there? I mean, is it on him pre-snap to figure out what the defense is about to do? But either way, this was a beautifully schemed and play called blitz from the Bills, man. This, whoo, here's the clip right here. I mean, like I said, a lot of that was on him, the taking the sacks, not seeing receivers open and stuff like that. But literally, like, on a play like that, again, worst case scenario is interception, so don't do that. But, like, really, what is he supposed to do right there? But at the end of the day, man, I agree with my boy George Carmi over there. Shouts out to him. If you're not following him on YouTube and Twitter, man, make sure you find him. He's GCARMI21 at Twitter. He brought up a great point that the film is now out on Sam Howell. How does he adjust, and how does he break tendencies moving forward? The film is out there. Now we got to move forward and see, like, what's going on. How are you going to adjust? Now that, like, because, I mean, granted, people had tape on the Cowboys game, but they didn't have tape on Sam Howell under Eric Bieniemy entering that Cardinals game. And even then, we kind of started a little rough. And then the Denver Broncos game, we started rough there, but the only tape they had on him going into that game was technically only the Cardinals game. Then the Bills come, one of the best defenses in football, one of the best coached defenses in football, very talented as well on top of that. And they have now the Cardinals and the Broncos game to go off of and develop that perfect game plan to shut down Sam Howell and completely make him have the worst game arguably in his life. And so now I just want to see that now the tape is out there. And I was saying this during the live stream like middle of the third quarter, going into the fourth quarter, all of that. I was like, hey, man, people are going to take this template for how the Bills did us and try to use that against Sam Howell from now on. So now it's up to Eric Bieniemy, but most notably Sam Howell. How are you going to adjust to this new game plan that defenses are throwing at you? Because I know the Bills are more talented than what we faced against the Cardinals and the Broncos, but a lot of it was more so just scheme and strategy. And the Bills just had a better game plan on how to stop Sam Howell. And I'm pretty sure upcoming teams are going to do the same thing. I'm pretty sure the Eagles are literally going to try to exactly replicate what the Bills did. And if anything, they have a more talented team. At the very least, a more talented defensive line for sure. And so they're going to try to throw at us what the Bills did. And how is Sam Howell going to counter that? But I love, hey, man, Sam Howell, his mental makeup, I'm very confident in him. I still believe in him, even with all of those bad advanced statistics and everything I showed y'all. I still believe in him. First of all, Mr. Bounce Back. Never scared of anything, has a bad play, comes back. Even at the end of that game, that last drive where we finally were able to put up some points, 3 points, that man was throwing confident throws. Some of them were bad. Some of them he may have been too confident. But one thing about it, he's not rattled. He's not discouraged. He was throwing some dots there, even though some of them were in like good coverage, shouldn't have thrown that pass. One thing is about Sam Howell, you don't have to worry about his confidence at all. And I love the fact that he also takes accountability, man. He said after the game, I don't make any excuses for myself. I expect to play much better than I played Sunday. My teammates in this organization deserve for me to play better, unquote. That's it. He's not blaming the offensive line. He's not blaming Eric Bieniemy. He's not blaming anybody else but himself. I think that was actually today after practice that he had that press conference and said that. And also, shouts out to JP Finley for bringing this up. Sam Howell's last objectively bad game came in 2021, opening loss UNC versus Virginia Tech. 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. In his next game, well, his next ACC game, like versus actual like quality opponent, Howell went for 5 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a win over University of Virginia. So I'm telling you, man, he's Mr. Bounce Back. I want to see if he can come back against the Eagles and ball out. Man, if he does that, man, I'll never lose faith in him. I'll believe in him to the end. If he can go after that game he had against the Bills and then ball out against the Eagles the same way he went from Virginia Tech to University of Virginia, let's get it, man. Also, it's not all on Sam Howell. We're gonna get to the offensive line later, but Eric Bieniemy, I'm looking at you a little crazy too, my boy. Cause like, look at this screenshot right here. Who's open? No, really, like who, like for real, like what is Sam Howell supposed to honestly do in this situation right here? Who's open? We got to do better. It looks like the underneath route may open up at a certain point, but then again, that receiver at the very bottom of the screen is going to go up. Maybe it's like a pick between these two guys, but at the same time, when he's being pressured as quickly as he is, he knows he's got to get the ball out of his hands quickly. So I guess try to dump that off. Just go ahead and dump the ball off to the running back and see what happens. But that defensive player is playing zone coverage. So, hey, you throw that to the running back if you want to, and maybe he's there to maybe intercept it, tackle him immediately, whatever. You possibly even consider it a medicine ball. So maybe the receiver at the bottom of the screen, maybe he ends up open after that DB goes underneath. But maybe by the time Sam Howell throws it, that DB that's responsible for that zone just stays with the receiver going up, and then that's a difficult position to be in right there. So at the end of the day, it's mixed blame, because if you're looking at the screenshot, the offensive line with 5 people is struggling to block 4. And so that's why the Bills are able to have 7 guys in coverage, which is a difficult task for Eric Bieniemy to draw up anybody open when there's 7 guys back there covering in zone coverage, one of the best zone coverage secondaries in the NFL. But going back to Eric Bieniemy, Washington wanted to create more space for playmakers after the catch this season. But through 3 games, the Commanders ranked 28th in yards after catch at 4.03 right now. But they were 12th after 2 games with 4.85. So really, that last game against the Bills skewed the data dramatically, because we were 12th before we went to that game. But at the same time, we complained about Scott Turner. We were 19th at the end of the year last year with 4.88. So, hey, man, Eric Bieniemy, We brought you in here to do yards after catch, and right now we're not looking as good yards after catches even that we did last year. Now, the first 2 games we look better, but if you take into account the first 3 games, we're looking worse than last year under Scott Turner. Also, another instant statistic. Now, Puka's going crazy. We'll talk about him later, but a little like shortly after this. But Puka Nacua, however you pronounce it, that receiver for the Rams is going slap diddly and setting records. He has 10 more targets than Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson have combined right now, which is inexcusable. I don't care how crazy Puka's going. Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson have been 10 less targets combined than Puka is insane. But Puka, again, admittingly, is having a great season right now. 41 targets, most in the NFL right now. 29 receptions, second in the NFL. 301 receiving yards, 6th in the NFL. So, I mean, it's bad both ways, though, honestly. Also, Chiefs pass to run ratio with Eric Bieniemy and 2-time MVP Pat Mahomes last year, 62% to 38% pass the rush. Right now, we have a 65% to 35% with Sam Howell in 2023. So does Eric Bieniemy believe in Sam Howell more than he believed Pat Mahomes last year? That's backwards. Shouts out to my boys Ref the District on Twitter and YouTube for bringing that stat up as well. I got to make sure I shout them out for that because that's a crazy one. Right now, Eric Bieniemy is throwing the ball more with Sam Howell at a higher rate than he was even with the Chiefs last year with Pat Mahomes. So we got to change that. I know, granted, we've played from behind every game. We've had to make these come from behind wins. So understandably, we've been passing the ball more than we want to, but that's still an incredible statistic. Also, the Washington Commanders have only run the ball 36% of the time on 1st and 10 so far this year. So that's crazy. That we've only, I know I do want to pass the ball more on 1st and 10, but golly, 64% to 36% is not balanced. So, I mean, the defense pretty much knows what we're going to do. Also, we haven't run the ball at all on 2nd and 10 so far this year. That's crazy. If that's true, shouts out to Russellmania, the guy that runs Locked On Commanders. If that's true, that's insane. That's whoo. Also, shouts out to my boys at the Tan Top Podcast. We're going to bring them up a lot for a lot of these statistics. But basically, in 3 games, the Commanders are at 51.7%, 16 of 31 for drives that start in their own territory and reach at least their opponent's 40 and or what I would call scoring territory. After 3 games in 2022, last year, they were at 34.3%, 12 of 35. So technically, they're way better in that stat. But another stat, the Commanders are right now at 31st in 3rd down percentage, but are tied for 2nd on number of 3rd downs faced. So they're successful on 1st and 2nd down. They're great there, technically. But 3rd down, they struggle, and then the turnovers are also making things worse. Also, shouts out to Tan Top Podcast, because this whole string of statistics that we just went through the past couple of minutes, including this one coming up right now, straight from them. Tan Top Podcast, YouTube, Twitter, all of those wonderful follows. They're always bringing crazy stats, man, and great opinions. So make sure y'all follow all of them as well. If they cut down on the turnovers while improving their 3rd down percentage to at least the league average, which is 40%, this could be a legitimately good offense. This offense could actually be really good. So we just got to get better on 3rd downs. We got to get better with pass protection. Sam has to get better with just not taking sacks the way he does. At least turning a lot of those pressures. I mean, which is the offensive line's fault. Turning a lot of those pressures and not allowing them to become sacks. That's on him. Getting the ball out of his hands sooner. Eric Bieniemy scheming up guys to become all open easier and more often and stuff like that for him. So, but hey, man, as far as Eric Bieniemy goes, this is a 2-way street. So if the offense balls out, and we're going to praise Eric Bieniemy like we've done the last 2 weeks, especially that Denver Broncos come from behind down 21-3 victory, we also got to give them a lot of the blame when the offense isn't balling out. So it's a 2-way street, man. Eric Bieniemy has to take some blame when it's bad, but he also deserves his praise when it's good. But you got to give them both. You can't just do one or the other, man. Also, moving on, shouts out to Tan Top Podcast for this again. In 3 games, the Commanders are 2nd worst in turnovers with 8. The Vikings are the only ones with worse at 9. That's why they're 0-3, because they've been balling out. They just keep turning the ball over. And our turnover differential right now is a -3. Terrible. It should never be negative, period, let alone -3. Also, a crazy stat for Antonio Gibson. Crazy, terrible stat. Since 2020, when the Washington Commanders, well, football team at the time, I believe, drafted Antonio Gibson, he has lost 8 fumbles, 7 of which have come in the red zone or inside the team's 37-yard line. In that span of all qualified skill players, Gibson has cost his team the 4th most expected points added, an advanced metric that gives yards context. So the only 3 running backs who have cost their teams more points are running backs Melvin Gordon, Dalvin Cook, and Ezekiel Elliott. So that's interesting company because you hear those names. Those are good running backs, but that's not a good stat to be a part of. So Antonio Gibson, bro, not all fumbles are basically treated equally. They're not, they don't hold the same weight. Antonio Gibson fumbles at the worst times, either when we're right in range of scoring or so far back on our side of the field that the other team, the opposing team, ends up getting the ball in range for them to score. He doesn't fumble in the middle of the field. He always fumbles in the worst situations. Not all fumbles are created equal. That's why that advanced statistic is in place. Meanwhile, Brian Robinson on the other side, in a positive light, right now, Brian Robinson is 7th in rushing yards with 216. Also, running backs with the most 10-plus yard carries over the last 12 weeks of NFL football, dating back to last year as well. Brian Robinson's 3rd with 23. Only people ahead of him are Christian McCaffrey and Nick Chubb. And, man, my boy Nick Chubb, get well soon, my boy. Come back even stronger, man. Georgia with you, my boy. We ain't forgot about you. We ain't gonna forget about you. Let's go crazy. Also, now let's get to this offensive line stuff, because I already gave you some great running back statistics from Brian Robinson, some bad ones from Antonio Gibson. What's the offensive line looking like? So when it comes to pass protection composite rankings from 3 different sources, your Pro Football Focus, Sports Illustrated, and ESPN, when you combine them, technically the Commanders have the 14th best pass protecting offensive line out of the entire NFL, which is crazy. The 14th. Now, ESPN feels like we're absolutely terrible with a 43 grade, but Sports Illustrated gave us a 73 and Pro Football Focus gives us a 75, which again, when you take into account like a composite rating from all 3 places, they feel like we have the 14th best pass protecting offensive line in the NFL, which is hard to believe when you watch the games. But hey, man, you can't argue with data and opinions from a lot of different places like that. So again, it's more so on Sam Howell than anybody else. But for some reason, they feel like the offensive line. I don't feel like the offensive line has been the 14th best in the NFL. I would say 20s. I wouldn't say it's the worst. A lot of people feel like we have the worst O-line in the NFL. I don't think it's that bad, but I also don't think it's 14th best at all. I don't agree with that at all. It can't be. Also, the Commanders, when it comes to offensive series resulting in a touchdown or a first down, we're 18th there. So we're kind of average at 68%. 68% of our offensive series at the very least result in a touchdown or a first down. So that's interesting. Of course, the Dolphins are first by far ahead of everybody, but our offense isn't as bad as we think right now. It could be way worse, but it also should be better. It could be worse, and it should be better. That's how I'm going to describe that. Also, shouts out to 10 Top Podcast for then again. In 3 games, the Commanders' defense is 20th in the NFL in allowing teams to convert third downs at 41.4%. Remember, we finished first last year at 31.9%. So defense, you better get it together. I know it's the Bills, but yo, hey man, we're not going to get back into that allowing everybody to pick up third down conversions like it's nothing, like we were before last year. Let's get back to last year where we were first in that category. Got to be better. Right now, we're average. We're not terrible. We got to get back to being great. But you got to take into account the Bills. Shouts out to 10 Top Podcast for this as well, because the Bills are first in the NFL in converting third downs on offense with a 51.2%. And they were first last year with a 50.2%. So the Bills just do this. When it comes to third down conversions, they're the best team in the NFL. But still, it's no excuse. Our defense were the best at stopping it last year, and the Bills are the best at creating it this year and last year. When we collided, the Bills just got the better of us. So defense, you got to step up and get back to where you're supposed to be. I mean, you got to take into account that it was the Bills, but at the same time, we have high expectations for this defense. I don't care who we're going against. Also, shouts out to Ref the District for this one. In the Ron Rivera era, Washington has trailed or been tied at halftime in 39 of 54 games. 72%. That's terrible. But glass half full, 10 of those 39 games, Washington ended up coming back to win 26% of them. So that's actually pretty good. Also, the Commanders are 13-2 in games where we've led at halftime. Can we please get off the fast starts? We're 13-2 when we lead at halftime since Ron Rivera's been our head coach. Can we please get off the fast starts? I beg it you. Also, shouts out to Grant Paulson for this one. The Commanders have played 217 games at FedEx Field. Sunday's 34-point loss was the third biggest blowout loss Washington has suffered in that stadium's history. That's insane. That's terrible. 35 points. That was December 8th, 2023 versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Then 35 points. That was September 14th, 2008 versus the San Francisco 49ers. And then we had that terrible loss against the Bills on Sunday, 34 points. So the third worst blowout FedEx Field has ever seen for the Washington Redskins football team, Commanders, whatever you want to call. Also, another glass half full though. Dominic Foxworth ranked his top 5 saddest buildings in the NFL. Broncos #1, Bills 2nd, Jets 3rd, Raiders 4th, Vikings 5th. And even after the loss that we had against the Bills, we're still not the worst. And I feel like the biggest part of that is Dan Snyder not being around, because we were #1, I'm pretty sure, according to everybody's rankings for the saddest teams in the NFL for a while now. Because it's not just about losing, it's also just having Dan Snyder poisoning your franchise. So the fact that we're not in the top 5 even after a Bills loss like that, let's go. I mean, 2-1 helps a lot there as well, so we'll see how this goes, man. Also, moving on, shouts out to Tan Todd Podcast for this statistic as well. If you want positive takeaways from Sunday's game against the Bills, up until 14 minutes 5 seconds left in the 4th, leading up to the Gibson fumble. Offensively, they moved the ball but just failed to finish drives, literally. And defensively, they held the Bills to 16 points up to that point, which is interesting. And 2 drives started within our own 35 when the defense got onto the field. Literally, the Bills are set up to score. So, I mean, if you want to look at it that way, it's really just, it's not even the defense, it's really the offense, because the defense can only do so much with what they had. Also, shouts out to my boy Manny Bitton, because I completely agree. He brings up a great point. The Commanders just basically played a Super Bowl caliber team. We learned on Sunday that they're just not on that level yet. Now, me as Rico of Street Scores, I still feel like we're good enough to make the playoffs. We can beat bad teams. We struggle against great teams. We're somewhere in that middle, good enough to make the playoffs still. But do we feel like we're Super Bowl contenders yet? No. Can we become that by the end of the season? Of course, maybe. Not very likely, but maybe. There's a possibility. But as of today, after that loss against the Bills, after we're 2-1, we're not Super Bowl contenders as of right now. I still feel like we're playoff contenders, but we learned going against a Super Bowl contender, we're not on that level yet, just point blank period. And also, what I've been saying even since the live stream even while it was still like 3rd quarter and we were obviously going to lose the game, my whole point was that no matter how bad this loss was, it's still only 1 L. Doesn't matter how bad you get beat down. Just because we lost by so many points, it doesn't equal 2 L's for us. Like the NFL's like, man, you lost so bad, you deserve an extra L for that. No, at the end of the day, we're still 2-1. So, hey, man, let's get to it. Y'all know I'm Mr. Glass Half Full, so I'm excited. Speaking of Glass Half Full, Logan Thomas may be back for this upcoming game against the Eagles, like I alluded to, like I foreshadowed in the intro. He was back out there with his helmet and everything, participated in individual practices. He was limited, wasn't a full participant. He wasn't participating in team stuff. But you never know, man. They interviewed him after the practice and everything in the locker room. He seems good to go. So don't be surprised if Logan Thomas is back out there against the Eagles, and man, we could use him. Also, I thought it was really funny, random note, there were clips coming from practice today from Scott Abraham at Scott7 News on Twitter. He showed the fact that Antonio Gibson was going through a lot of anti-fumble drills. Like they were having him smacking his arm, all kinds of stuff while he was going through drills. So he's receiving special treatment and specifically working on drills that get him better at not fumbling the ball. I thought that was funny, but also necessary. Because, man, I mean, it's not like we can cut him. He's on the last year of his contract, so if he doesn't get right, then it's over with for him. But it's not like we can cut him. So, hey, man, just get better because we need you this season, my boy. You're too explosive to be out here costing us games like that. But, yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button. After all of that data I gave y'all, grades, statistics, surface statistics, advanced metrics, rankings, percentages, all kinds of stuff. Who do you feel like that loss against the Bills was on the most? I mean, it looks like Kendall Fuller is one of the best corners in the NFL, so it's not him. But do you feel like it's more so the offensive line? Was it more so Sam Howell? Was it more so Eric Bieniemy? If you had to split it up into a blame chart pie or something like a blame pie, who would get the largest percentage of that pie? For me right now, I feel like it was more so Sam Howell than anybody else. But there's also a good percentage to be handed around to everybody else as well. Most notably, offensive line and Eric Bieniemy. If I had to rank my top 3, that would be my top 3. But let me know in the comment section how you feel about it. And yeah, man, make sure you stay tuned for all of the more content that I'm coming out with, more interesting stuff like this, where we're truly trying to dive into why we won games or why we lost games. I may even take some time to do some all 22 to point out specific moments why we lost that game against the Bills and stuff. So make sure you stay tuned for all of that. And of course, man, YouTube is tripping right now. So if you want to support the stream in any way, donate to the Rico Scores Cash App, $ Rico Scores, and also the PayPal, WilliamHC94@gmail.com. If you want to support the channel anyway, I really appreciate it because I'm trying to save up for another stream deck. I'm trying to save up for a better mic, all that type of stuff. So if you want to support the movement or just say thank you for these videos in any way, $ Rico Scores Cash App, and also the PayPal, WilliamHC94@gmail.com. It's in the description of every video, every live stream. So if you're confused about any information, it's down there. And I appreciate y'all, man. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.